colder, with no worries on my mind. And now I'm getting older, my heart is growing colder all the time.
Okay, so I have watched Cyberpunk Edgerunners not just once, not just twice, but 3 times to give you all not only what I think is a good, solid, reliable review, but also a character breakdown and overall analysis that we'll get to later. We'll mark those, so if you haven't watched all of Cyberpunk, you won't be spoiled, and you can come back to it later when you feel like it's time. But I will say that the anime is absolutely excellent. I would say it's honestly a masterpiece. It's really rare that I watch something twice, let alone 3 times, especially like in short succession. I mean, the only anime that I've ever really like gone back and rewatched Durarara like one other time, but I love Durarara. Freaking Full Metal Alchemist, right? Brotherhood, gotta rewatch that every blue moon. Samurai Champloo, Soul Eater, Gurren Lagann, and yeah, that's like pretty much it. So it's really rare that I rewatch something. So that lets you know how good this was. But I really wanted to get out and give like a full thought process and like breakdown on why I think the show is excellent and what I really like about it in contrast to the other media that we have received. So, that being said, I think the show is amazing. The artwork is like really cool. It's really good. There's like the line work in very like intensive moments is really nice. The way that it's sort of like used to express themes and motifs is insane. Like the visuals are so on point and so good, and they highlight and illustrate the world in like such a perfect way, especially like nuanced moments and stuff. I think that the anime itself tackles the world and its issues within it, like crime, the inescapability of the meat grinder that is the world of cyberpunk. Um, there's a lot of motifs and themes that it explores that I'm not going to give too much away right now. But I think it does a fantastic job of tackling and handling those, especially in contrast to the game itself, which like kind of like tapped on them very lightly, but like really did not go nearly as deep into them, which is like kind of surprising considering that like a game typically is a more fleshed out form of media as opposed to TV, but the anime really made the world feel lived in. It really explored, like I said, a lot of these themes and just brought them full circle all throughout. It handled them in a really, really good way, and it made, like I said, I don't want to like repeat myself too much, but it made the world feel lived in a way that felt real and cathartic in a sense where like there was a level of relatability. It touched on transhumanism and like cyberpsychosis, obviously, and it made like me ask myself questions of like how far would I go, you know, if I existed in this world, like how chromed out would I be, how chipped in would I be, and that was really eye opening and thought provoking. Sort of made me look at myself in a very what is the word, introspective light. And I think it does like a good job of highlighting sort of the bleakness, the meat grinder aspect of this world, and just sort of honing in the fact that like, right, if you played the game, you know there are no happy endings. I'm not gonna say too much. I don't want to spoil it, but there are no happy endings, and everybody is sort of like enslaved to something, which we kind of got in the game, but there's like a glimmer of hope for those at the tippy top. Whereas in the anime, no. Like, there was none of that. Everybody is in the meat grinder, and you're stuck in it. And like I said, it ultimately, like, circles back through these motifs all throughout, from start to finish, and you see the full spectrum of everything, and sort of how everything is, like, played out into this very visible cycle, or, like, wheel. Everything comes full circle. I also really, really liked the Easter eggs that were sprinkled throughout the series, right? Certain head nods, certain characters, certain cameos. It was a really good time, especially if you played the game, and it really made me want to go play Cyberpunk Red. I'm not gonna lie. You obviously saw a couple of clips. I went back and I did purchase the game on PC just to give it another go. I'm not gonna lie. I'm gonna have to try it with some mods, because it's fun, but yikes, yikes, yikes. But also, I think ultra-violence anime and manga are like typically critically acclaimed, and like I said earlier, that is kind of brought into fruition. Hold on. Weird. Brought into fruition sort of in this cathartic aspect that makes you ask yourself, like, who am I? What am I capable of? What would I do in this situation? What would I do in this scenario? What would I do in this world? That and the characters are really, really good. I think all of them have like a level of humanism. They're pretty fleshed out. They're a little bit more than just like one-note characters for the most part, especially Becca. Love Becca. She's my favorite character. I thought about making a fan cam just for her, just to like drop in this when I say like I love Becca, because that's how much I love her. But I was like, nah, that's not me. But I might make a fan cam for her in the future. Who knows? She is a fantastic character. But ultimately, yeah, I really, really, really like the characters. I hope to see y'all doing some cosplay, Cyberpunk cosplays soon. I myself am trying to get back in the gym, do a Cyberpunk cosplay, so we'll see if that works out when it comes. But yeah, ultimately, the visuals, the music, dude, the music like hits super hard and drives points home. I get like choked up listening to certain songs. Other songs get me absolutely amped. They really went like, they played the soundtrack perfectly. And it's like most of the songs, if not all of them, are from the game. So it's even the visuals, the way that like the calls work and the chips, like literally everything is like directly from the game. So they did a really good job of just keeping everything honed in together, like keeping it all contained within this similar visual universe. And it was really, 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 really well done. Overall, I'd say it's really rare that I give something a 10 out of 10, but this was like an 11 out of 10. Again, I watched it 3 times, you know what I mean? I went back and rewatched it because I really liked it, and then I was like, let me do the review and like dissertation sort of, and I was like, yeah, I have to record like my unadulterated reactions to everything, even though they aren't like my initial reaction, which was a lot stronger and a lot more hype and like sad and amped up and this and that. Overall, masterpiece. Absolute banger. It is so good. If you haven't watched it, I highly recommend it. Like I said, it made me jump into the game again. It made me want to play Cyberpunk Red. You already know I'm a big tabletop enthusiast, so for it to hit all of these notes so perfectly, I'm enamored. I'm in love. I think it is absolutely perfect. There's not a single thing that I would change about it. And like, oh man, the visuals, like in certain scenes, are just so good. So if you haven't watched Cyberpunk Edgerunners, please check it out. Give it a chance. If you have, then bear with me for a little bit longer. We're about to dive into some character analysis. Just a little bit. Nothing too crazy. Just a couple thoughts here and there. But if you haven't, go ahead, click off of the video, and come back afterwards. Okay, so for the characters, they're all pretty diverse, but I wanted to just kind of like touch over the major notes of them and like the distinguishing features that I think stood out between them and sort of like their ties to each other and why I really like them. Obviously, David, you know, he's scrappy, he's charismatic, he's full of life, but I think like one thing about David that I immediately noticed and really liked, especially considering I'm obviously a One Piece fan, he sort of inherits dreams. He sort of like takes on the will of those who came before him, and in a sense like lacks his own. But I like that because like even though he doesn't have something he himself stands for, he stands for his friends and the people he cares about, and sort of pushes them to meet their own dreams. And I really, really like that aspect. I thought that was like really cool. It's like really rare that you see a character who's like doesn't have their own ambitions or ideals. Typically, you'll see them as like a Gary Sue, right? They can do no wrong. But he's just like a very flawed, like hot-headed kid all throughout. But it serves to like he has like the fire of life within him, and it pushes him to push others. And in a way, he sort of like wants to be depended upon. And I thought that was like a really cool aspect, especially for like a main character. It made him feel like very human and like very flawed, but like very identifiable. And then, of course, you have Lucy, right? She's the female love interest. She's a bit of a loner until obviously her and David get more intertwined and entangled. But like, despite her lonerism, she obviously wants to be depended upon by Maine and the other cyberpunks, but especially by David, right? She's obviously very intelligent. She's really, really caring about her team, but especially about David, right? Like, everything she does ultimately is for David from start to finish, from taking him under her wing to saving him from getting scavenged, to getting him meds, to training him, to falling for him, to protecting him. She wants to see him sort of like take on his own dream and fulfill that. And I thought it was like opposites attract, you know what I mean? Like, so it was a really nice dynamic to see them sort of like pushing each other. We have Maine, who's like the big brother father figure. He's really dependable. You know, he's a leader. He wants to see everybody get a fair cut, everybody get a fair shake, everybody make it out okay. He's really charismatic and in turn, like, really good-willed. Like I said, he's charitable. He wants to see all of his people eat together, not like eat the biggest piece of the pie. And that's like a really good, he makes for a really good leader. And so him sort of like mentoring David and like being this like father, big brother, and like pushing him to become the man that he becomes is really cool. And it comes full circle in a very fulfilling way. You have Dorio, who's like the mother, sort of big sister, right? She's sort of like second in command, the Zorro, if you will. But I would say in some ways more like dependable and headstrong than Maine. When David gets taken, she's like, all right, we gotta go get him. You know, she's the caretaker. She's looking out for Maine. She sort of is the glue, right? When Maine is fumbling, she is the glue. You have Rebecca, who's just scrappy and violent, but she's very caring and like full of, similar to David, like full of life. But I also like, she's sort of like the ram of this show. Sort of like the love triangle. I loved her. I think she's my favorite character. Just like her personality really, really shines. She is just bubbly and bright and flashy, and literally flashy because she's constantly shooting. She is very scrappy and violent. You have Kiwi, who's another loner, really resourceful, really intelligent, and despite the fact that she is a traitor, I would say she's ultimately like self-serving. She just wants to see herself okay. She's not like too concerned about the group. She's obviously gonna put herself first. You have Falco, who's also like, I would say, the alternative caretaker. He's very supportive. He looks after the team, but even though he is voiced by the legendary Matt Mercer, he did not get enough screen time. I love my cowboy. He is, makes me want to grow my mustache big and thick and curl that bad boy up. Pilar is like really crass and sexual and just serves as comedic relief, right? We didn't get too much screen time with Pilar, but he definitely served as like the comedic relief of the group. And then on a side note, you have Faraday, because he's a big important character who's ultimately like self-serving, self-important, and desperate to like find prosperity in his own sense, like find his own level of like peace or like freedom. Which makes him like kind of a scumbag piece of garbage, but is understandable for the meat grinder that the world is. Alright, now we're gonna do a little bit of analysis. So, This one is kind of complicated. I'm not gonna like go too crazy deep into this, because this like ties into all of the episodes. But I just want to sort of highlight the overall motifs or themes that I think I found, and then if you guys think there's more that I missed or like better fleshed out, let me know in the comments below. But Memento Mori, right? A warning of death. It shows up all the time throughout the show. Snakes in the grass. That one is pretty self-explanatory, as we have a couple traitors. There are no happy endings, which I think tragedy is ultimately a fantastic storytelling device, but this like really drives the point home that there are no happy endings in Night City. Everyone is shackled, right? Everyone is chained to something, whether it's their ideals, money, fight for power, whatever it is. Everybody is shackled to something, right? The cycle of pain and dreams, which is sort of carried on by mainly David. He fights for like the cycle of others' dreams, which in turn is like leads to his own turmoil and pain, but is constantly recurring throughout the show. A mind is a terrible thing to waste. You know, delving into cyberpsychosis and just transhumanism. It comes up a lot. And it is hinted at a lot. There's a lot of foreshadowing in the show. Cream, casuals, everything around me. That one is self-explanatory. I mean, from freaking healthcare to medicine, right? The immunoblockers, literally to people getting chopped up for parts. Like, everything is run by money. Everything boils down to money. That's all that matters. The flames of rage, these sort of get stoked within David, and they sort of drive him to do things and take certain actions throughout the show. They're like the driving point, and I really like the intro because it like sort of highlights that David is a character like engulfed in flame. He is a flame, right? And flames are ultimately destined to burn out. This one is like sort of from my own life. It only matters if it matters, right? Giving meaning to certain things and just sort of letting everything else like fall to the wayside, or just kind of like, okay, well, it is what it is, but I really care about this thing. So giving emphasis to certain things and letting certain things just kind of go. And then last but not least, we have the wonder of love. Love ultimately being a vehicle that sort of pushes people to do certain things, follow certain dreams and ideals, pursue certain goals. So I think we have like a healthy list of motifs that sort of cycle all throughout the show. Alright, so episode 1 is titled Let You Down. And it's like really on the nose, because obviously the episode begins and ends with David sort of going to this corporate academy on his mother's behest, and ultimately dropping out, right? He goes in, obviously has to get picked up, things happen, can't really afford to pay for upgrades necessary for school or even for school itself, can't afford to pay for his uniform getting washed, etc., right? The motifs are abound, right? Heavily. They are cycled all throughout. Right? I have like little blurbs for each episode, and I'll drop them so you can obviously sort of take a screenshot or pause it if you want to see. But yeah, everything is sort of like introduced, the heaviness of the world, the density of like the actual pain, right? The meat grinder, if you will. Obviously, David's mom dying, and sort of like him not even being able to see her because of the idea of cream. All of these ideas are like heavily implemented, and it is like, even though it's the first episode, it serves as a prelude to David sort of stepping out, like the first step on his journey to become who he is. And then episode 2, like a boy, there's a lot of allusions here, right? Like the Ripper Doc saying that basically David Sam Devastan is going to ultimately lead to his demise, to his cyberpsychosis. David sort of dives into like the cycle of violence, right? Stoking his flames of rage. He goes back to fight against Katsuo, ends up with Lucy, gets like his first dose of immunoblockers, sees the moon beauty, is sort of like not only dealing with carrying on his mother's dream of like him leading a good life, but is like now pushed into like Lucy's dream of wanting her to go and pursue that. Right? Like a boy. Is the boy becoming a man, sort of in a sense. Smooth Criminal, episode 3. Oof. One thing that I really like about the show that commonly happens is like Maine, whenever he's like really interested in something or about to say something funny, he'll like flick his glasses up. But he foreshadows this idea that David carries on later, right? That like I can't go backwards. I have to push myself further and further and further. Like I have to push myself to the absolute limit, right? And Maine even like sort of foreshadows that you can't trust anyone in this world besides yourself, or there's nobody that you can trust more than yourself. And then it immediately cuts to Kiwi. So again, there's like heavy foreshadowing. Then of course, obviously Maine pushing David like you have to get cyberware, which is almost like a symptom of cyberpsychosis to my understanding, is like the desire to get more, the desire to like constantly upgrade and ascend humanity, in a sense. And then obviously we have Faraday's first appearance. Moving on, episode 4, Lucky You. Everybody is like pushed heavier and heavier into the meat grinder, right? I think it's I can't remember Homeboy's name, but it doesn't matter. Basically, David is told, we'll find out if you're the shit or just another shit stain, right? Maine pushes David towards like using a gun, upping his cyberware again, just getting heavier into the cycle of violence. And then obviously we have the first cyber psycho who comes and kills Pilar, which ultimately leads to David killing him, and then in protection of Lucy, and those two sort of becoming more and more intertwined. Episode 5, All Eyes on Me. Maine promises David about giving him his arms whenever he passes on, which is a big foreshadowing of both of their cyberpsychosis. David waking up in the XBD with Kurosaki is like a huge foreshadowing to his own future. Despite how hard like David all throughout the series is like, that won't be me, that won't be me, that won't be me, I'm special. And ultimately like leads you to believe that until you get to the end of the show. But even like Jimmy like foreshadowing David's like delve into cyberpsychosis, ultimately like madness and his own death, as he's like laughing as like his final moments, I felt like was kind of a very like ominous foreshadowing. Episode 6, Girl on Fire. Very painful episode, very painful foreshadowing. Just sort of a huge glimpse into cyberpsychosis, into Lucy's past, into Maine and sort of his past. Like everything is being orchestrated by Militech, right? All of these things are finally piecing together, right? Why Arasaka wants David, David sort of like pushing himself, displaying his martyr tendencies, trying to go and save Maine, and sort of having Maine's dream passed on to him. And then ultimately Maine and Dorio passing. Episode 7, Stronger. David comes back with the glow up of the century. I mean, this dude was like on something else, right? Comes back with a glow up. He has fans now. He has a very high reputation. Falco is sort of foreshadowing the end. I expect you'll fly higher than Maine ever did, both literally and metaphorically, right? David obviously goes down as a legend. David flies to the top of Arasaka Tower. Faraday speaking about muddying the mind, sort of foreshadowing cyberpsychosis. Then Lucy and David revisiting Lucy's dream, David's nerves shaking, foreshadowing his own cyberpsychosis. And Lucy's sort of like going out to protect David, right? The thing that matters to her. Episode 8, Stay. David begins to descend into full-blown cyberpsychosis. The Arasaka counter-intel sort of highlights the shackles that bind everyone and the cycle of violence, right? Militech pulls up, or Militech sort of showing that they have a leash around Faraday's neck. David sort of flashing out, not really sort of, David flashing out on the Ripper Doc. The Ripper Doc foreshadowing, obviously, David going down in cyberpsychosis and spiraling. And then Lucy sort of striking out again to go protect David and ultimately get caught up as the snake reveals itself as Faraday and Kiwi. Episode 9, Humanity, right? Again, all of these like very ironic, very foreshadowing episode titles as David sort of loses his humanity, pushes himself to the absolute brink, right? He dons the cyber skeleton. Kiwi and Faraday both betray the Edgerunners, right? Sort of like casting away their humanity to a certain degree as they screw over their friends and teammates. And then David sort of like fully engulfed in rage, diving into cyberpsychosis, and it's super ironic because Kiwi says that the power of the cyber skeleton is unlike anything devised on this side of humanity. And then the final line of the episode is into the fire, right? So this is like the end. Nail in the coffin. Here we go. Episode 10, My Moon, My Man. We end up on the moon, right? David is going absolutely crazy, right? Memento Mori is everywhere. The foreshadowing of him sort of like going to Arasaka Tower, right? As he's like flashing back to his mom. Just sort of like him losing himself throughout the city, his past. And then obviously Kiwi sort of like cycling back, you know, you can never trust anyone, which ultimately leads to her getting killed and then her setting up everybody else. And then, of course, the Corpos and talking about Adam Smasher, who is ultimately a giant Memento Mori-like sign for David. And the irony of the Corpo telling Faraday that he's on a leash, but like they're all on leashes. Is super wild to me. And then David just sort of going out saying like, whatever, Chum, like I give a shit. But in a sense, like I said, it only matters if it matters, right? David already had fulfilled what he wanted to do. He went out the only way he knew, pushed himself to his absolute limits, and was able to protect Lucy. But Lucy obviously ends up on the moon, which is like her dream, but it's only a half dream because she's there by herself, and it serves that there are no happy endings. But again, I think all of these things sort of like serve to drive home just how good the show is and like how good it is at tackling these themes. And then, like I said, I'll flash up all of the themes and sort of the episode blurbs on the screen so you all can see them. I know this sort of is kind of a different style video for me, obviously. Next time I will do more editing, have it a little bit more on point, but I mean, I've just been busy. But regardless, I hope you all liked the video. I hope you all like the style. If you want to see me do more of these, like breakdowns in short forms, let me know. Leave a like, leave a comment. If you want to see longer forms, we can do that, but I don't want to do like, 2-hour videos unless it's like a podcast style stream or whatever, because we'll be here excuse me, all day. But yeah, if you all like the video, leave a comment. Let me know if I missed anything. Let me know if you want to see more. Just let me know your thoughts, and then subscribe if you haven't and you want to see more content. Yeah, I appreciate you. Peace.